Welcome to Compasscope. Our research platform covers over 1,100 public companies, but today we are sharing a special macroeconomy feature.
Okay, let's just unpack this right away. If you've looked at a screen in a newspaper or, even just walked past a TV in an airport in the last 24 hours, you already know the headline.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It really is. It's
Yeah.
the kind of breaking news that genuinely bisects history into a before and an after. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has been killed in U.S.-Israel airstrikes.
Right. And it is a massive geopolitical earthquake. I mean, we are literally watching a 40-year-old theocratic structure lose its keystone overnight.
Exactly. And the headlines, they totally reflect that panic, right? They're screaming war and chaos and retaliation, which rightfully so. Those are the immediate visceral reactions you'd expect.
For sure. But, we want to do something a little different on this deep dive.
Yeah, we aren't going to just track the missiles or map out the troop movements. We're going to look at what happens the morning after. Because while the dust is still settling over there, the machinery of the Iranian state,
And the machinery of the global economy.
yes, both are grinding their gears in ways that just aren't immediately obvious on the nightly news. I'm your host, and joining me to break this all down is our resident geopolitical and macro expert.
Glad to be here. And look, that morning after angle is critical. Everyone is staring at the explosion. But what we really need to look at is the vacuum. We need to look at the economic shock waves and, frankly, the hidden mechanisms of succession that are kicking into gear right now.
Because that's where the real risk is and, the real opportunity for anyone who's actually paying attention to the markets.
Exactly. If you're managing a portfolio or just trying to protect your assets, this is the stuff that matters. To guide us through this fog, we're diving into a brand new, incredibly comprehensive research report from Compasscope.
Yeah, the Compasscope report is fantastic. They've essentially synthesized the raw intelligence, the market data, and even Iranian constitutional law to give us a roadmap for the next 18 months.
What I really appreciated about their analysis is that it didn't just give us military tactics, it gave us the actual so what for our portfolios and our domestic politics.
Right, so if you're sitting there wondering what this means for global stability, for energy markets, or even for the U.S. economy back home, this deep dive is for you. It connects the dots between a bunker in Tehran and, say, a gas pump in Ohio.
Or a tech stock in your 401k.
Exactly. So let's get right into it. Segment 1, the vacuum. Usually when we talk about succession planning in the corporate world, we're talking about a CEO retiring and updating their LinkedIn profile.
A bit of a different vibe here.
Just a little. In Tehran right now, I imagine it's a bit more kinetic. So who is actually answering the phone in Tehran right now? The supreme leader is gone. Who steps in?
Well, according to the Compasscope analysis of the Iranian constitution, specifically Article 111, there is actually a default setting. It isn't just one person running up to the microphone. It's a leadership council.
A committee. That sounds incredibly inefficient for a country in the middle of a war.
Oh, it's clunky. But it's designed to be a fail-safe, not a permanent solution. It's a 3-man caretaker committee meant to just hold the fort until a permanent successor is chosen. And the makeup of this trio is really fascinating.
How so?
Because it basically forces a marriage between the 3 competing power centers of the regime.
Okay, let's break down this trio. Who exactly are we talking about?
First, you have the president, Masoud Pezeshkian. Remember, he was just elected back in 2024. He's the heart surgeon turned politician.
Right.
In this trio, he's generally viewed as the pragmatic face of the executive branch. He's the guy who actually has to keep the electricity running and the hospitals open.
Okay, so you have the pragmatic surgeon, but he doesn't control the guns. Who is looking out for the hardliners?
That would be the second member, Chief Justice Ghulam Hossein Mohseni Ajay. He is a hardline, former intelligence judge. Think of him as the hammer.
The hammer.
Yeah. He represents the judiciary and the darker side of the security state. He's basically there to ensure nobody gets any wild ideas about freedom during the transition.
The third guy.
Ayatollah Alireza Arafi. He's a cleric who was just appointed as the council's jurist member. He represents the religious establishment, the seminary in Qom.
So you have a doctor, a judge, and a cleric walk into a room. I feel like there's a bad joke there, but the stakes are just way too high.
Way too high. And here is the real nuance that Compasscope highlights. This trio has significant limitations. They can run day-to-day affairs, sure, they can sign laws, they can command the armed forces, but, and this is crucial, they cannot dissolve parliament and they cannot amend the Constitution. They are strictly caretakers. They are handcuffed to the existing rules.
So they're just keeping the lights on while the building is literally shaking. But can they actually control the streets? What's the report saying about the atmosphere on the ground? Because, we're seeing videos of celebrations online, but we're also seeing videos of massive protests.
Yeah, Compasscope describes a mix of two extreme realities right now. On one hand, you have security first. It is martial law in all but name, internet blackouts, Revolutionary Guard patrols on every single corner, mass detentions.
They're locking it down tight.
Exactly, shutting down any organized uprising.
So that's the stick. Is there any carrot at all?
Not really. The other side of the coin is economic freefall. The financial reaction has been just brutal. The Iranian rial is trading above 1,400,000 to the US dollar on the parallel market.
Wait, 1.4 million to 1? That's straight up hyperinflation territory.
It destroys life savings overnight. Just imagine the psychological impact of that on the average citizen. You have these initial celebrations in some cities, people cheering the regime's weakness, but that's quickly colliding with nationalist rallies after the airstrikes.
Right, because nobody wants their country bombed.
Exactly. It's this volatile mix of down with the dictator, but also don't attack my country. And when your money suddenly becomes worthless, panic sets in fast.
Which brings us to the big question, right? The throne game, if you will. This caretaker council can't last forever. Who takes the top spot permanently? Is this the actual end of the theocracy?
That is the trillion-dollar question. Compasscope ran a really detailed scenario analysis on this, breaking down the probabilities of what happens next. And I have to say, the results might surprise people who are trading on the expectation of a revolution tomorrow.
Okay, lay it out for us. What's the most likely outcome?
The most likely scenario, sitting at about a 40% probability, is hardline continuity. This is where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, steps in and backs a loyal cleric.
Do we have a name?
The name floating around everywhere is Mujtaba Khamenei, the late leader's son.
So dynasty, the son just takes the father's seat.
Essentially, yes. The IRGC prefers a figure they already protect, someone they know they can influence. They do not want a wild card. This would mean tighter militarization and likely regional escalation. It's the classic circle the wagons strategy.
Okay, so that's 40%. What's the alternative? Is there a path to something, softer?
At 35%, we have the technocratic pivot. This is where the Assembly of Experts, that's the body that technically chooses the leader, compromises and picks someone like Ayatollah Arafi, that third member of the council we just talked about.
Compromise candidate.
Right. Now, he's a conservative, absolutely. Don't mistake him for a liberal reformer, but he is less confrontational than the son. This would be very similar to the transition we saw back in 1989. It signals stability to the markets. It's the keep the ship afloat option.
Got it. And the other scenarios, I assume there's a straightforward military coup option in there.
There is. There's a 15% chance of a junta. The leadership council just kind of lingers. They never actually pick a successor, and the whole system morphs into a de facto military theocratic dictatorship. Think early 1980s Burma, or maybe Egypt under Sisi, but with turbans.
Wow. And the final scenario, the one all the cable news headlines are speculating about, regime collapse.
Yes, but Compasscope puts that probability at only 10%.
Only 10%. That seems incredibly low given the magnitude of what just happened. The supreme leader is dead. The economy is totally trashed. Why is the collapse of the system so unlikely?
It's a great question, and it definitely counters our Western intuition. We tend to assume that decapitation means death for the regime. But the report details what they call the pillars of survival.
Okay, what are the pillars?
First, the coercive apparatus. The IRGC is still highly cohesive. They haven't fractured into competing warlords, and frankly, they haven't run out of money to pay their officers yet.
Ah, money talks. So if the soldiers get paid, they stay in the barracks.
Or they stay on the streets suppressing the protests.
Exactly. Regimes usually only fall when the army splits or the paychecks bounce. Secondly, there is no velvet revolution template here. There's no Lech Wałęsa figure. There is no organized opposition leader or structure inside Iran to channel the public's anger.
What about the diaspora, though? The groups outside Iran, we see them organizing and protesting on TV all the time. They're highly fragmented. You have monarchists fighting with leftists who are fighting with everyone else. They are honestly too busy arguing with each other to present a unified government in waiting. So without a viable alternative, the system tends to hunker down rather than fall apart. People might hate the regime, but they fear total chaos more.
That is a really sobering reality check. So the regime likely survives, but it's deeply wounded. Now let's pivot to the authors of this new reality, the United States and Israel.
Right, the attackers.
Here is where it gets really interesting to me, especially if you're trying to model geopolitical risk for a portfolio. We often say U.S.-Israel as like one single word in these conflicts, like they are in total lockstep. But do they actually want the same thing here?
That's exactly what Compasscope analyzed, and the answer is sort of, but the nuance is what matters for the markets.
And sort of usually means no in diplomatic speak.
It often does. They break it down into tiers. Tier 1 is security. On this, they are totally aligned. Both Washington and Jerusalem want to destroy the nuclear infrastructure and the missile capabilities. That's why the strike package was a joint operation.
Okay, that's the easy part. Where do they split?
Tier 2, which is regime change, the actual endgame. Israel's leadership, specifically Netanyahu and the IDF planners, are signaling pretty clearly that they want the Libya model.
The Libya model being total dismantlement.
Total. Even if it means absolute chaos. They want the threat gone, root and branch. They're willing to accept a failed state on their border if it means that state definitively cannot build a nuke. But the U.S. is much more ambiguous.
How so? Because the rhetoric from the U.S. has been pretty fiery, too.
It has, but it's split. You have President Trump's rhetoric saying, end the Islamic Republic, which is classic regime change language. But then you have Secretary of State Marco Rubio briefing Congress on a limited mission.
Limited mission. Yeah, that sounds a lot like we really don't want to get stuck occupying another country.
Exactly. The report calls this U.S. posture strategic flexibility. Basically, Washington is hedging its bets. If the regime collapses, great, the U.S. claims credit for liberating Iran. But if the regime survives and decides to negotiate to save its own skin, what they call the Venezuela precedent, then the administration claims a massive victory through de-escalation.
Wait, explain the Venezuela precedent for us. Why would Washington want that?
Think about Maduro in Venezuela right now. The regime is completely isolated, heavily sanctioned, the economy is wrecked, but it is stable. It's not actively exporting terror in the same way, and it isn't a chaotic war zone that requires intervention. For the U.S., a contained, weakened Iran might actually be preferable to a Libya scenario.
Because a Libya scenario is just a giant chaotic vacuum in the Middle East that eventually sucks in U.S. troops and resources anyway.
Precisely. So the ambiguity is a feature, not a bug. They are keeping their options open while Israel is pushing for a definitive, messy end.
Okay, so we have a massive power struggle in Tehran, a strategic divergence between the U.S. and Israel. Now, I really want to bring this home, literally, for the listeners sitting at home looking at their 401k or just filling up their gas tank. So what? How does all this macro theory actually hit the wallet?
Well, the most immediate impact is obviously energy. We've already seen Brent crude jump about 10% to hit $80 a barrel almost instantly.
$80 is painful at the pump. But it isn't catastrophic. We've been there before.
Not yet, no. But the risk, and this is what the markets are watching with white knuckles right now, is the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow channel where 20% of the world's oil passes through. If Iran decides to close that choke point for more than 3 months as retaliation, analysts are projecting oil could spike to $120 to $150 a barrel.
Ouch. $150 oil changes everything. That is straight up recession territory.
It is. And in terms of winners and losers in your portfolio, it's a very mixed bag. If you are heavily invested in U.S. shale or the defense sector, you are likely seeing green. Those are the clear winners in this grim scenario.
And the losers.
The Eurozone, India, basically any major energy importers. And obviously airlines and the transport sector get crushed. But the bigger issue, the one that affects absolutely everyone, regardless of what specific stocks you own, is inflation.
Man, I feel like we just got done talking about inflation. Are we really going back there?
I know, we all want to be done with it. But a sustained run of $100 plus crude adds about 0.6% to 0.7% to global inflation. That doesn't sound like a massive number, but it puts the Federal Reserve in a terrible bind.
What kind of bind?
The higher for longer bind. The market was fully expecting the Fed to cut rates in June 2026. Now, Compasscope says they are likely on hold through at least January 2027.
So no mortgage relief anytime soon for anyone looking to buy a house?
Probably not. And while a soft landing is still the base case, they put it at about a 60% probability, the risk of mini stagflation has risen significantly.
Stagflation, that is the ugly word. Can you just define that for us quickly, just so we're all on the exact same page?
Sure. Stagflation is basically the worst of both worlds for an economy. It's when you have stagnant economic growth, so the economy is slowing down, jobs are getting scarce, but at the exact same time, prices are going up, inflation stays hot.
Which is weird because usually when the economy slows, prices drop.
Exactly. Stagflation breaks the standard rules. It's a central banker's absolute nightmare because the tools you use to fix one problem make the other problem worse. If you cut rates to boost jobs, inflation explodes. If you hike rates to kill inflation, you cause a massive recession.
So for the investment enthusiasts listening to this, what is the actual move? If stagflation is a rousing risk, where do you hide?
The report suggests a pretty clear shift in strategy. Cash flow-rich quality credit and energy stocks are in. You want companies making real money right now. But duration-sensitive tech? That might really struggle.
Duration-sensitive tech.
Yeah.
Translate that for those of us who don't hold a CFA.
Yeah, think of your high-growth tech companies that aren't making much actual profit today, but they promise huge, massive profits 10 years from now. Their current stock value is largely based on that future potential.
Right.
Well, when interest rates stay high, that future money is worth a lot less in today's terms. Plus, those companies rely on cheap borrowing to fund their growth. If rates stay pinned high, their oxygen gets cut off. So the shiny, highly speculative tech stuff takes a major hit.
Okay, so watch your portfolio allocation carefully. But there's another layer to this domestic impact that I found absolutely fascinating in the report. It isn't just about the Fed and interest rates, it's about the U.S. government's own checkbook.
Yes, this is a really critical point that is largely flying under the radar right now. It is a fiscal double whammy hitting Washington at the worst possible time.
Break it down for us.
On one side, you have a massive spending surge. To support this ongoing operation replenishing missile stocks, keeping carrier groups deployed, sending aid to Israel, estimates are that we need a Middle East supplemental bill of about $80 to $110 billion.
That is a ton of money. But, you know, we usually manage to find money for defense when we need it.
We do, but here's the kicker. At the exact same time defense spending is going through the roof, federal revenue just crashed.
Hey, why did revenue crash?
The Supreme Court. The ruling in Learning Resources v. Trump.
Oh, right. That just happened last week. They struck down the broad tariffs.
Exactly. They struck down the administration's broad tariffs as unconstitutional. And in doing so, that wiped out approximately $175 billion a year in expected revenue for the Treasury.
So let me get this straight. We are spending roughly $110 billion more on this conflict and simultaneously losing $175 billion in income because the Supreme Court said no to the tariffs.
You got it. The credit card limit just got slashed right as we went on a massive shopping spree. The federal deficit is now nudging towards 7% of GDP.
That seemed played explosive.
Explosive is the perfect word. This sets up a massive, bitter battle in Washington. Democrats are absolutely going to attack the budget as guns over butter. They'll argue, why are we funding a war in the Middle East when we can't fund domestic needs, especially after we just lost our main new revenue stream?
And with the midterms coming up in 2026, the timing is huge.
The 2026 midterms are going to be fought on exactly this fault line. It's going to be cost of living versus national security.
And what about Trump? Doesn't a war usually help the sitting president?
Historically, yes, there is a rally around the flag effect. Whenever a major conflict starts, the president gets a temporary polling boost, and this is a really big, but history also shows that the boost fades incredibly rapidly if gas prices stay above $4.50 a gallon.
It always comes back to the gas pump, doesn't it?
It really does. Voters care deeply about national security, but at the end of the day, they vote on their wallet. If they feel safe from foreign threats, but they're completely broke at home, the incumbent usually loses.
So let's quickly recap this whole journey. We started with a fragile three-man council trying to hold it together in Tehran, the doctor, the judge, and the cleric. We looked at the diverging endgames of the U.S. and Israel, one wanting a managed, stable decline, the other wanting total demolition of the regime.
Right.
We saw how $150 oil could freeze the Fed's plans, hurt duration-sensitive tech, and bring back those ugly stagflation fears. And we ended up with a Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, completely complicating how Washington actually funds this war.
It's all connected. That's the beauty and honestly the terror of these deep dives into the macro environment. You pull one single thread in the Middle East and it unravels a budget deal in Washington.
It really does. So as we wrap up, what is the one big thing you want the listener to take away from this? If they're at a dinner party tonight and someone brings up Iran, what is the smart insight they should drop?
I think the most provocative idea to sit with is this. The entire world is waiting to see which model Iran ultimately follows. Does it become a Venezuela isolated, poor, heavily sanctioned, but fundamentally stable under a rigid regime? Or does it become a Libya, completely broken, chaotic, a failed state exporting terrorism and instability across the region?
The scary part.
The scary part is that the answer likely won't come from a ballot box. It won't come from the people protesting in the streets, at least not initially. It will come down to whether the IRGC can keep making payroll.
It literally comes down to the accounting department.
If the check's clear, the regime likely holds. If the money runs out, then we are looking at the abyss.
If the check's clear. It is terrifyingly simple when you put it like that. Well, on that note, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. And for everyone listening, keep an eye on those boring tanker tracker websites. They might just tell you the real story of the next 6 months a lot faster than the breaking news banners.
Absolutely. Watch the flow of oil and watch the flow of money.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious.
This content is produced by Compasscope.com. For more than 1,100 public-listed companies, find detailed company research reports, visual mind maps, earnings call analysis, and audio discussions on Compasscope.com.